What is up, Phoenix Suns fans? We are live. I don't think I've gone live since the NBA trade deadline, but how is everybody doing tonight? We are going to be joined by a special guest and a friend of the channel. We're going to introduce him in a minute here, but first off, thank you to everybody who is watching along live or is watching later in the day or the night. I really do appreciate your support anytime, and thank you to everybody that is tuning in. Also, real quick disclaimer before we bring on our guest. This is sort of an open show. Like, if you guys have a comment or a question, it doesn't have to just be about the Suns. It can be NBA related. Please let us know. We will try our best to get to it. I told our guest to keep an eye out if he sees something good, and it's going to be a great show. So let's finally bring on our guest here. Kevin Hicks from Sports Illustrated is joining the show. Kevin, how's it going, man? Welcome to the channel for the very first time.
It's going great, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thank you so much for being here. So, Kevin, real quick, before we tell the people where to find you at, we met at NBA Media Day, and you were very kind to me, and we ate our little lunch break at Media Day, and we were just chatting it up and everything, talking all things Suns. That was a great time. Then we started engaging on social media, and here we are. So, Kevin, do you want to tell the people where to find you? Can you tell the people how long you've been covering the NBA, the Suns, and really how long you've just been doing your thing, man?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I'm born and raised in the Valley. I've
Yeah.
been a Suns fan for as long as I can remember, since I was seven years old, second grade. Uh, and I got the chance to cover the Suns for SI because my boss, the great Johnny Druin, met one of my buddies that's studying journalism at University of Indiana at the draft
Yep.
combine in Indianapolis. They talked about me, and he was like, "Hey, I needed some help on the Suns site." So I wasn't even a journalism major; I was a business major, and I
Wow.
got on the site and I've been helping out with Cardinals and Suns content, and I've been the number 2 on the Suns site for the last 2 seasons now. So it's been going great. You can find me on social media on Twitter at khicks_21. Um, and yeah, it's an honor to be on. I always love talking hoops with the homies.
Well, thank you so much for being here, man. And you guys, Kevin's stuff is linked down below, the Sports Illustrated page, his Twitter. Just search for him. You'll find him. Links down below in the description. So, Kevin, I think this is going to be a really great show, man. Lots to talk about. I wish we were recording, with, a winning record. Do you remember what a winning record looks like, Kevin? Because it seems like so long since we had one of those things. I wish we were talking under better circumstances. So, Kevin, let's just dive into this, man. As you can see, the little bar under us, it says the current state of the Phoenix Suns. We are 26-29. We've won 26 games, Kevin. This is not good. So I'm going to kind of let you take the microphone here, if you will. And I wish I had a better way to phrase this and ask this, but can you just give us your thoughts, your opinions, your takeaways of the current state of the Phoenix Suns, man? Like, what is happening to our Phoenix Suns?
It just defies all logic, man. That's all.
Right?
That's like what it really boils down to. Because you look at last season, people were acting like last season was an abject failure when they were 33-21 at this point in the season. 33-21, top 10 offensive rating, with all of the vitriol and criticism aimed at Kevin Young, with the belief that Devin Booker had taken a step back last year, the all the failed signings, the Keita Bates-Diop, Yuta Watanabe, all of those really fell flat. Eric Gordon was great for a couple months, and then he really plateaued. It just
Yeah, he did.
the perfect storm of crap came last season, and they still managed to win 49 games despite that. They still managed to have a top 10 net rating and have the favorable matchup in the first round against the Wolves that ended up actually backfiring. Tables turned so quickly in that. But this season, things should have been no-brainer, better on paper. I think
Hmm.
everybody went into the season thinking 50+ wins was a lock. You look
I
at
did.
Budenholzer and his track record of a regular season coach. his teams are the definition of consistency. I think he's had maybe 2 teams in his coaching career that were below 500 for a regular season, and I believe that one of them was his first year in Atlanta, and that team was rebuilding, so you look at that, Budenholzer should be a clear upgrade in terms of installing his offensive and defensive disciplines, and I do think that he has to an extent, but you look at the roster, and the roster looked better on paper too. You had
Yep.
Tyus Jones and Monte Morris, you brought them in to be the quote unquote stabilizers, even though you didn't necessarily need a point guard. One of your big issues in the fourth quarter in 2023-24 was turning over the ball in inopportune times, uh, being way too uh, undisciplined, telegraphing passes. And veteran laden teams shouldn't be doing that. And Tyus and Monte are two of the best at being turnover reverse. Um, you bring back Royce, and Royce was a great fit for the most part, even with his inconsistencies. You bring Bull back, and you think Bull looks like a perfect linear fit with Budenholzer. Like you could see it, like you could see tomorrow with his fit, similar to somebody like Brook Lopez. He might not, and he's not Brook Lopez, but you could see that. Um, it's just so confusing. Doesn't make any sense. Like, it just really, I can't hear you right now.
I'm so sorry. Rookie mistake
There we
there.
go.
My
There we go.
apologies.
There we go.
So I was just gonna say, man, like out of all my years on YouTube, out of all my years just being a Phoenix Suns fan, being a basketball fan in general, and my audience know this, like I've studied the history of basketball, I've studied the history of the Suns. I don't think I've ever seen this, especially in what looks like 2 seasons back to back of just pure disappointment
Mhm.
with the most expensive roster in NBA history. Uh,
Yep.
it's literally baffling. It's confusing. It's disappointing. Feel free, chat, to enter in whatever other word can describe the current state of the Phoenix Suns, man. It has just been miserable. So I do appreciate your
Yeah.
insight, your opinion on that. It has just been brutal, man. And I know it's February 21st right now. We're just entering the second half of the second half of the season, but right now it's looking pretty grim. So any just kind of final thoughts before we move on to our next topic here on the current state of the Suns? Oh, still there, Kev?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. But yeah, do you have any final thoughts there, or should we just move on to our next segment here?
Um, yeah, I didn't going back to your point of not remembering if there was a season that was this confusing and disheartening. I think the closest thing you can think of, like I can think of personally, is probably the 08-09 season when Terry Porter was fired halfway through the season. That's
Yep.
like the closest approximation I can think of because that team was you had Shaq, you had Stat, you had Steve. That team should have been amazing. I think they won 46 games and still missed on the playoffs. So
Yep.
you can't look at 2013-14 and say that because they overachieved
Yeah. That was a fun
tenfold that
season,
season.
though. That was actually a
Yeah,
fun
you can't.
season.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, that was so much fun watching that team. You can't look at the teams that were in the cellar when it was D-Book and a bunch of G leaguers for 5
Yep.
years. It's even last season, they still looked like a top 10 team in basketball for a good portion of the season, even with all of the ups and downs and the critiques and calling for Frank Vogel's head, calling for Kevin Young's head. They still won 49 games. They still
Yep.
avoided the play-in.
I think
They
fans forget that
like
too. Just saying.
yeah, and now
Hmm.
the crazy thing is now 26 and 29, you have to go 23 and 4 over the rest of the season to match last season's win total.
Jeez Louise.
You're gonna have to,
That's
and
brutal.
you have the league's toughest schedule too. You play Milwaukee twice, you
Yep.
play Cleveland one more time, you play Boston both
Boston.
times,
Yep.
you
Hmm.
play Houston. I believe you play Houston 3 more times.
I'm looking at the
It's
schedule right
it's
now.
not
Yeah, it's
a
brutal.
yeah.
Plus, you got to factor in there
Mhm,
might just be random losses, which we've seen a lot this season to just
mhm.
weird, poor teams or teams that are in the middle. Yeah, it's brutal, man. I'm looking at the
Yeah,
bottom.
Chicago
I'm
and
looking at
Toronto.
yeah, like I'm looking at like March to April, and I'm just like, all of those teams are pretty much playoff teams, besides like the Bulls and Raptors. Like, yikes. uh, not going to be easy. And as Johnny Timestamp says, it's a crying session, it's a therapy session. That's what we're doing here. And also, shout out to our friend John Voida from the Suns Jam Session podcast, Bright Side of the Sun. He says, I'm just here to bitch about the Suns and support my guys, Suns Geek and K Hicks. Well, thank you, John, for being here. And thank you for everybody that is here.
Appreciate it, John.
And sorry for my rookie mistake earlier of being muted. It's been a while since I've had a
It's all
guest on the show. So
good.
thank you for being here, Kevin. Also, I want to give a big personal shout out here to Adrian, Olivia. Appreciate you guys being here. I love you guys. And thank you so much. Some good friends of mine, and I really appreciate them. So, all right, Kevin, let's move on here. I'm keeping my eye on the chat because I'm sure there's going to be some great questions and comments later on. But this is just a quick question, Kevin. We talked about this backstage. Was there a specific moment or game or just a time you realized, like, oh man, this season is catering, we are going downhill? Because like I told you, for me personally, it was that November 27th loss to the Brooklyn Nets. I don't know why that loss like stung me so bad, but it was like that night. Who was the player? Tyrese Martin, I think you said, went off for
Mhm,
like 7 or 8 threes. They had no Cam Thomas that night,
mhm.
no Cam Johnson. But then there was like other losses, man. I could go down the schedule and just I don't want to revisit that. So what was the moment that you realized that this season is like catering and going downhill?
Um, Before we get to that, I wanna thank Danger369 for bringing up the
Yeah.
Josh Bartelstein point. We're gonna have some very interesting things to say
Yeah.
shortly about that whole situation.
I'll highlight that.
Shout
Mhm.
out for bringing that up, thank you. Um, so I think that most Suns fans' answers will be probably the game against the Nets, like you said, and think that's a very valid answer. But just from an analyst perspective, like the way I'm watching them now, more as like a media member that compared to a fan, I'd say the game against Minnesota on November 17th, honestly. That was a game without KD because he was still out due to the ankle, but that game was right in their laps. Devin Booker had his best game of the season, 44 points, Tyus Jones, 11 assists. Mason Plumlee played a great game. Mason Plumlee played a great game. You pretty much had a perfect storm, and you lose a game off of Julius Randle step back jumper at the buzzer that the league ended up ruling a travel the day after. That's just the kind
Yeah.
of fortune that they've had all season long, and I feel like I don't like to talk about superstitions too much or anything, but, like, that's just bad mojo right there, like, something like that can just completely deflate, and you can tell there's so many body language experts that are like, "These guys are not having a good time, these guys are not motivated, these guys are not a happy basketball team." I mean, I
Yep.
don't even think you have to be an expert, you can just watch them and you're
Yeah.
like, they're not connected, they're not having fun, and that's
Show somebody who like barely watches basketball and be like, just give me your thoughts on the Phoenix Suns and their body language and their energy. Just talk to us. And then bam, that's probably the only answer you need is from somebody who doesn't watch basketball. And they'd probably say the same thing. Yep.
Yeah, it's just not you're right, there's so many losses you can point at and you're like, "That's a red flag, that's a red flag, that's a red
Yep.
flag." And there's very few wins that you're like, "That's a green flag." We talked about that, like, that game,
Mm-hmm.
November 30th against Golden State, that was a very complete performance. The Christmas game against Denver, there's been some glimpses
Well,
of
we had a
that good
bad loss
team that's
before
hiding in
Christmas.
there, but
Yeah.
mhm. Yep. Yeah, there's been glimpses of that good team within this up and down season, but it's just not nearly enough to justify having a lot of faith. I still definitely believe in having an optimistic approach,
Mhm.
but there's not a lot to like right now, especially with that loss last night.
I don't care who you are or how educated you are or how long you've been a Suns fan. I think all of us can pretty much agree with what John Voida said. I honestly don't know. I don't know at all. That's just the Phoenix Suns
You
season
said
right there
trade
so
Jamie
far.
Lee.
Who said trade Damian Lee? I said that on
John.
trade deadline. I was like, he never plays. Trade him.
Trade
All
him
right,
back to Golden
Kev.
State.
Right. Seriously. Okay, so let's sort of move on here because obviously we got some great questions and comments in the chat that we're going to get to. And we have some other things that we want to discuss as well. So, you know what? We're going to kind of switch things up a little bit, Kev. Before we get to the positives, because you know me, I try to keep things positive and optimistic on my channel. This was something we discussed backstage, and I feel like it's sort of picking up some, it's trending, if you will, because I have some opinions on it. My audience may not like it. I know you have some opinions on it because of the current state of the Phoenix Suns, how disappointing the season has been. Do you personally think that Mike Budenholzer, who, by the way, I believe just signed a 5-year contract, I believe, should he be on the hot seat? Should Mike Budenholzer be fired at the end of the season? Feel free to give your answer, but I'm just going to give a spoiler alert. I say no, not right now. But Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, I believe I am on the same page with you there. Um, there's obviously certain things that you have very valid reasons to not be happy about if you're in favor of firing him already, like the Ryan Dunn treatment. Uh, you can say that it's a strategic thing all you want, but at the end of the day, he's the only reliable POA defender the Suns have. He's really one of the only plus athletes that they have. His offensive game hasn't been nearly bad enough to justify sitting him like Andre Roberson. It's not necessarily a 4v5 like in situations such as Andre Roberson. There are some things that Bud has done that you can critique. We're not saying that Bud's been perfect this year. He's been even great, even good. But
Yeah.
there's 3 things that I look at. So, 1, I look at his schemes coming to life. Uh, there's much more intention with the offense. The defense is, uh, forcing opposing offenses into shots that they are more desirable for them. But opposing teams are just shooting the lights out. That's what it is. You could say it's shooting luck. You could say it's the personnel that's on the floor for the Suns. But I feel like Budenholzer's principles are actually effective, believe it or not. Much more than Vogel's, at least on offense. Um, Number 2, if you are on 4 coaches in 4 years, your organization is going to have a reputation of being one that can't be trusted, that is unstable, that the first second a thing goes wrong, it's scapegoat time. You look at the Knicks about 10 years ago, they had that run where they had Derek Fisher, Mike D'Antoni, David Fizdale. They were going through coaches like, uh
Yeah.
nobody's business,
Yep.
and they had that reputation before Thibodeau that you can't trust them even if they are a premier destination, and, it took a lot for them to get rid of that reputation. So I just don't think that it's the right timing regardless of any basketball-related thing,
Mhm.
just image-wise. And number 3, I think that Bud does have a very good staff in place. I like the
Yes.
vast majority of guys that he has on staff, especially Fizz. Fizz has done
Yes.
great work with Bull. Uh, I like even like the unheralded guys that you don't hear a lot about, like Mike Hopkins. He's a
Yep.
very, very good defensive coach. Schuler Rimmer is a very, very
Yep.
good coach when it comes to player development. He has a great bench, and that's something that's very invaluable because you look at the Frank Vogel staff, and a lot of those guys really weren't on the same page. They didn't really have a great rapport built up. He was forced to keep Kevin Young as a holdover, and you could tell that there was a disconnect between the players and the coaches, and there might be this year, but I feel like it's not as
As bad.
conspicuous this year as it was
Yep.
last year.
Yep.
Um, and I think that having a great pool of assistant coaches is just as important as having the head coach. It's
Yep.
not easy to find a good bench full of quality coaches that do a bunch of different things, specialize in
Exactly.
those things. So I think those are my 3 main reasons why it's probably not the best move to fire Bud right now. I'd say maybe if things don't work out next year, maybe then you revisit it.
Yeah,
But even
like the
then,
2026,
it's
20
hard
or yeah,
because
20. Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
yeah, even then it's hard because in the 2026 offseason you are probably going to have a lot of flexibility if you trade KD and are able to find a trade for Beal. You might have a max contract slot to bring in a superstar if
Yep,
they become a free agent. So
yep,
it's just hard, and, like, great coaches don't grow on, trees, like, that's just
yeah.
like, Bud is still a top 10 level coach in the league if you ask me, like, even with this season struggles. He's an NBA champ, he's a multi-time coach of the year. Uh, he's really done a great job of advancing that Popovich, tree of
Tree.
offense.
Yep.
Um, he's he's a good coach. I think that's really all that needs to be said.
Yeah. No, I mean that was well said. I really don't have too much to add to that except for my boy Brent Barry is on this coaching staff, which I was a huge fan of because
Mhm.
you're actually getting like a player, you know what I mean, who won championships
Yep.
and
James
played a long
Posey
time in
too.
the league. Yep, James Posey. Yep, and Brent Barry with his history of broadcasting as well. I was a big fan of. I was like, he
Mhm.
literally saw the game from like the best seat in the house. But yeah, James Posey. I forgot about him too. You know, we have a great coaching staff. Now, obviously, a great coaching staff isn't going to count, for winning a championship and being successful, but I feel like we do have a good coaching staff. You know how they've been saying like fans shouldn't be complaining about Matt Ishbia like spending all of this money because it's not our money. You know what I mean? Because coaches, I guess, have like a different salary and it's different in terms of the front office or something like that, or the salary cap. Like, because we're obviously paying Frank Vogel and not coach this team. I don't have Monty Williams' contract in front of me, but I'm sure he's probably still getting paid to not coach this team. So uh, I first off don't think we should fire Frank Vogel for one, or not Frank, excuse me, Mike Budenholzer for one. But two, it's like we would be paying yet another coach to not coach this team. Now, again, I know it's not our money, and I know the salary cap stuff, with the coaches' contracts completely different, but it just wouldn't make sense, in my personal opinion, to fire him right now. Now, again, like you said, next season, the 2025-26 season, if we're like a first round exit or whatever, then yeah, you might want to start heating up that seat or just fire him, at the trade deadline or before the trade deadline, whatever it is. But I don't think they should do it right now. You have to, depending on what happens with this offseason, whether Kevin Durant's on the roster next year, whether Bradley Beal's on the roster next year, I feel like you kind of have to keep going all in. And we're going to talk about the Suns' future and some past mistakes they've made later. But like, I don't think firing Mike Budenholzer right now is the best idea. And I know there's fans out there
Mhm.
that think Frank Vogel should be still coaching this team. You could make an argument because I see it in my comment section all the time. We owe Frank Vogel an apology. Oh man, Frank Vogel would have done this better and yada, yada, yada. Like, I'm just saying, I don't think it's smart to pay a coach to not coach this team, especially after 1 year. It hasn't even been a year yet. Fans want him fired like right now. Like, I don't think it should
Yeah.
happen. I don't think it should happen.
Especially I mean, this is an angle that I think is very important too. Like I said, like, the stability is very, very important regardless of anything on the court, like, that you might or might not like. Right after the KD situation, if you deal Budenholzer hand like that, that's just gonna be that might do irreparable damage to the franchise. That's, like,
Exactly.
something that might take a decade or more to come back from. Because
Yep.
now people are like, players are giving Phoenix a side eye because Phoenix says, like, Woj even said himself, everybody in the league circles have said that the Suns are now a destination franchise that once they have the ability to bring in free agents, like big name free agents, they'll be able to. They'll be able to compete with the New Yorks and the LAs and all that.
Yep.
Um, but with the KD thing, players are a little wary now. They're like, "Are they gonna go behind my back too?" Because KD's one of the 10, 15 greatest players of all time, and they went behind his back, and they didn't let him know about a trade until it was near the finish line.
Yep.
So, who's to say that they won't do that to anybody else? And if they do that to Bud, then that's gonna scare coaches away. Who's even gonna wanna coach the team if you do
Exactly.
that?
And, and,
That's
and that,
just
yeah. And especially from the fans' perspective, fans are like, Monty Williams did this so much better, and Frank Vogel did this so much better. I'm like, guys, like, what do you expect? Like, coaching can only get you so far. And like, if we fire Mike Budenholzer, let's say, like, let's just say Eric Spoelstra becomes a coaching free agent or something like that. Like, he wouldn't probably want to come coach here because what if he's like, oh, well, what if we lose in the first round? Am I going to get fired? Like, I don't know. I don't think it's the smartest idea. I feel like we're going to sort of be on pins and needles this off season. We're going to be checking our phones a lot to see if it happens. I don't think they should do it. But Kevin, let's try to have some positivity here, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, Kevin, because I keep things positive on my channel. As of late, that has been a little difficult, and I've talked to my audience about that. It's been really tough. But Kevin, are there any positives to the Phoenix Suns right now? Can this Phoenix Suns season be saved? Can they magically, like you said, what was it, win 23 games or whatever and somehow make the
23
playoffs
and
and go?
4.
Yeah, 23 and 4. Can they magically do that? Can they have better body language? Can they string off some good wins against some of the best teams in the league? I know I'm throwing like a bunch of questions at you, but like, is there any saving grace to this season, man? And if there's not, feel free to say it, man.
If I'm being honest, it's really tough to see them being able to string off like 23 and 4 feels like a pipe dream right now. I'd
Yep.
say even going like 19 and 8, it feels like a reach right now, especially with that schedule. If they had a lighter schedule, by all means they could do that. I mean, last season they had a very tough stretch over the final 10 games. I believe they went 8 and 2, and that's what got them in the play in. I mean, got them to avoid the play in. Um, but this year the league did not do them any favors in the second half of the season.
Yeah.
I was looking at that schedule from when it came out in July, and I was like, wow, they really did backload that schedule because you people like to go like you can't really judge a schedule until the season actually starts and you see how the team is. I was like, man, they got Cleveland, they got Boston, they got Milwaukee, they got Memphis, they got all of these teams that should be phenomenal.
Yep.
Because I was fairly high on Cleveland. I wasn't like as high as they are. Like I didn't think they were gonna be this good, but I thought they were gonna be very formidable. Um, but it's tough. I think best case scenario, you probably go 14 and 13, 15 and yeah,
Yeah.
15 and 12, 16 and 11, something like that, and you are able to sneak into the play-in. In a single game scenario, it's hard to bet against Book. It's hard to bet against KD. You maybe sneak in and get the 8 seed. Even with the 8 seed, you get OKC. That's your reward. Like, thanks, Adam Silver, for giving us OKC. Um, but yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Like,
Yeah.
ceiling wise, I just don't see any other route to building a higher ceiling or sustained winning.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's really doom and gloom, even for the most optimistic and positive Suns fans like me. It's definitely not looking very good. Real quick, shout out to Steven Ferraro. I hope I pronounced your last name right. Sorry if I didn't. Thank you, Steven, for the $1.99
What's up,
super chat.
Steven?
You
That's
guys
my homie
totally.
right there.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, thank you, Steven. You guys totally don't have to, but if you want to, feel free to leave a super chat. It helps support the channel, helps keep the lights on over here. Just leave a super thanks or a super chat. If you want to leave a comment in there too, I'll make sure to get to it and shout you out. I really appreciate it. So thank you, Steven. Also, John Voida is just leaving some hilarious comments and questions saying things like, question, what kind of cereal is Nick Richards? And somebody said Cocoa Puffs. I'm just like, this is getting out of hand. This is getting crazy, man. So, Kevin, I know I've kind of rephrased some of the show areas here and things we were going to talk about, but this is something that I read your personal article on and I really loved it. I tweeted it out. I'll make sure to probably find it and add it to the chat later. But Kevin, you wanted to talk about this, and I feel like this sort of ties in with just the Phoenix Suns season as a whole, man. And no, it's not Nick Richards being a serial. It's the Phoenix Suns' past mistakes are starting to catch up with them. And I feel like sort of the key words there are, well, first off, past, but then catching up, because we're what, year 3, year 2.5 of the whole Kevin Durant, Matt Ishbia era, the most expensive team in NBA history. It's starting to catch up, man. So Kevin, if you need any, like, if you want me to like share any part of that article, I'm sure I can, but like, do you want to talk to us about what past mistakes are catching up to the Phoenix Suns, how it's affecting them now, and how it might affect them later? Because I know a lot of Suns fans are like, rebuild, blow it up, get all of our draft picks back, yada yada yada. But like, Kevin, there's been a lot of other mistakes that the Suns have made that again are catching up. So Kevin, talk to us, man.
Absolutely. So I really didn't go over the eight and over Luca thing. I think
Yeah.
everybody's kind of resigned to the fact that that was probably the biggest blunder in franchise history at this point. It's really, really hard to justify that even going back and looking at Aiton as a prospect, because I feel like pretty much everybody had him number one, but it's not a big man's league anymore, at least not DA big man's league.
Yeah.
Um, so I started out in the post-bubble world, November 2020, when they took Jalen Smith number 10.
Yep.
And that's no disrespect to Jalen Smith whatsoever. He's carved out a nice niche in the league. He's a quality rotation player. But at the time, that was a puzzling pick even back then. He was it was like Cam Johnson, but he didn't really have a fit on the team unlike Cam. He was 25 to 30 on most prospect big board rankings. You already had DA obviously in place. You brought in JaVale the year after, and
JaVale McGee.
you had you had Dario too. You had a revolving door
My boy
quality big
Dario.
man.
Yep.
You didn't really have any spot for him to grow into his own and throw him into the fire, especially after you traded for CP3. That was the sign that you're going in. You're not really focusing on
The youth.
putting the youth movement in a focus. And in that case, you take somebody who's pro ready. You take a Tyrese Halliburton. You take a Desmond Bane at number 10. Even a Tyrese Maxey. He was young, but he was pro ready pretty much
Yes.
from day one.
He was a
You take
bucket
one
in
of those
college.
guys, and best case, I guess it's two best case scenarios. One best case scenario, you get one of those guys to grow into their own alongside CP3 and Book, and they're able to turn into the players that they are today. Best case scenario number two, you're able to move one of those guys for KD down the road if you don't win that 2021 finals, and you don't have to give up Cam, you don't have to give up Mikhail, and you have a much much more well-rounded roster to work with. Uh, Either way, that's a phenomenal outcome, and I feel like that's one that they're really, really looking back at and is haunting them right now.
Yeah. I remember that,
I
man.
think
Like, I was growing on YouTube then, and I remember I was baffled when we drafted Jalen Smith. Nothing against his talent. I wasn't like furious. I was just like, what? They drafted Jalen Smith. Like,
mhm.
I'll be real. I didn't even know that much about him. And I kid you not, man. My content creator friend, Romp 2.0, he just goes by Romp now. But he literally texted me. He said, watch the Suns draft Jalen Smith, and that was like moments before it happened, and they happened. I'm sure I still have that text message. He said, "Watch them draft Jalen Smith," and they did. And here we are, Kevin, catching up to the Phoenix Suns, past mistakes. I will never forget that moment, man. Like they did it, and he doesn't even play for us anymore. So, but he has had a good
Most
career.
frustrating.
He's still in the league.
Yep, he is, and he's playing pretty well, shooting like
Yeah.
38% from three right now.
Yep.
I was gonna say the most frustrating thing about that, I also had that in my piece, was that they ended up moving him for Torrey Craig,
Yep.
and they let Torrey Craig walk in free agency the summer before.
Yeah, that
So it
was
was kind of a
baffling.
pointless. Why did you let Torrey Craig walk in the first place if you were just gonna bring him back a few months later? Why did you attach a draft pick to it? It just That whole saga just made no sense to me specifically. Um, so I think I'm gonna move on to the next phase of
Yeah,
all this.
go for it.
I think one of the really, really big mistakes that they made was that they prolonged the Kevin Durant saga because the ball was in their court the whole time. They could have had a deal if they wanted to include McHale from the jump, and they refused to include McHale until Matt took over, and that was obviously the catalyst. You don't get that deal done unless Matt takes over uh,
Yeah.
conveniently on the trade deadline day or the day before.
Yep.
Um, it's just baffling. It kind of makes you think that when Sarver was suspended, he kind of gave the interim Garvin, he gave him
Sam Garvin.
the
Yeah.
red light to he did not give him the green light to get a trade pushed through, which I'm not surprised by that. It's disappointing, but that no matter what angle you take a look at that with, it was very much a blunder. You could have had KD and Book playing together from game one that season, and if that was the case, you're probably looking at a much more favorable playoff bracket outcome that year because you
Yep.
went 44 and 38. You were the number four seed, and that means that you ran into the Nuggets and you pushed the Nuggets to six, even with a couple of blowout losses. If you get the two or three seed, who's to say you can't make the conference finals that year and have a chance to make the finals, especially with a full year of KD and Book continuity built up? You only got 8 games of them in the regular season together. So it's just, it kind of baffles me. It kind of wasted a full season in that manner.
Yeah. It's tough too because, new owner syndrome, if you will. And in all fairness, I can't blame Matt Ishbia for doing it. That's just my personal opinion. I'm a little bit of a Matt Ishbia stan, but I mean, what was he supposed to do, man? Like, we got eliminated and blown out by the Mavericks the following year before the KD trade. And then, we got embarrassed by the Nuggets, I think. That feels so long ago. I can't even
Mhm.
remember, but back-to-back embarrassing playoff losses. And I feel like some Suns fans forget that. That's just my personal opinion. But anyways, what other Phoenix Suns past mistakes are catching up to them, Kevin? Because I'm
The
sure there's a
elephant
whole
in the
list.
room, the Bradley Beal trade.
Yeah.
Actually, before that, I want to go to Frank Vogel. I just thought of that.
Okay. We sort of talked
I'm
about
not
that
gonna
earlier,
trash
but
on Vogel. I'm
yeah.
not gonna trash on Vogel because I think that he is a very quality NBA coach, and he proved that over the last decade plus.
Yep.
But it kind of felt like that was just a uh, how do I put this? Like a square peg in a round hole from the start. Felt like they were trying to make something work that just wasn't stylistically in line with what Vogel wanted to do, forcing Kevin Young to be on his staff, uh, and more or less run the offense, the de facto offensive coordinator. Uh, the chemistry was just off. Uh, I was getting word as early as the first month of the season that year that there was already a disconnect between the locker room and the coaches. There was a faction of the locker room that was siding more with Kevin Young, and there was a faction that was more with Vogel. And you could see some of that play out on the court during that season. So I kind of feel like they just wasted a whole season trying to make something work that they knew wasn't going to work. And being totally honest, if Budenholzer was ready to coach 2 years ago, he would have been the hire, but
Oh
he kind of
yeah.
took his name out because his brother passed away like during that
Yeah.
playoff series before
Mhm.
the loss. So I feel like he kind of needed that year to regroup, and that's like absolutely all means to him. Yeah, do that. Like you have to put your well-being first.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
but if I'm being honest, I feel like they could a trial run head coach. They could have done better in terms of fit with the franchise specifically. Because Vogel's probably the best coach they could have gotten that was available on the market. But they could have gotten like a Jordy Fernandez. You look at what he's doing in Brooklyn right now. He could have been the jolt of energy that the franchise needed. And who's to say that he wouldn't be a long term head coach? Because he's kind of been uh, he's been really acclaimed across the league for several years now. He coached Team Canada in the Olympics.
Yep.
Uh, He's been De'Aaron Fox credited him with developing him, Nikola Jokic and Yusuf Nurkic both when he was with Denver. Uh, he's a phenomenal coach, and he was on the market. Uh, it's just that's just one thing that you look back and you're like, man, they kind of I want to say wasted a full season, but they definitely didn't go all out like we thought they did. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. Um, any final takeaways, or something you wrote about the Phoenix Suns' past mistakes that are catching up to them before we move on?
So like I said, the obvious one is Beal.
Yeah.
Um, with the second apron, that severely limits what they can do in the future. Pretty much all their future first round picks starting in 2032 are going to be frozen at the end of the first round if they don't get out of it. The no trade, allowing the no trade clause to stay in that deal was a huge blunder as well because I believe it would have been far easier to move him if they had talked him into taking that out. Um, and just at the end of the day, Brad's a good player. He's a great dude. He's a great representative of the city, but
Yes.
he's just too
Mhm.
redundant next to Book. It's just
It
they've
just doesn't
kind
work.
of exhausted all options to try and find a fit, and it's just not working. Like
Yeah.
they could have just waited it out with CP3. Honestly, they could have just paid him what he was owed and brought him back on bird rights the year after, and they would have had a lot more flexibility to make a trade for like Jimmy Butler. They could have brought in James Harden at a reduced rate because I know Harden's had a desire to come back to the Valley in the past. That's just one thing. That's the main thing that's like really hamstringing them, like at this moment specifically. I also want to briefly touch on the free agent signings they made. Like we talked about at the beginning of the show, like the Keita Bates Diops, the Yuta
Mhm.
Watanabes. Those guys look great on paper. It looked like,
Mason
oh yeah,
Plumlee.
around three mega star players. These
Mhm.
guys are going to their best qualities are going to shine, and that just wasn't the case. Wasn't really ever the case outside maybe a couple of game flashes from like Chimezi Metu that one. I think it was a Christmas Day game where he had like
Yeah.
19 rebounds. It just really didn't work out. And also how they handled the trade season this year. That's just the way they handled the KD saga, the trading the 2031 unprotected pick for three lower value first round picks.
Yep.
It just all of it's just a mess, and they're going to have to do a lot of damage control to make up for it.
Yep. I don't really know if I have anything to add to that, man. That was well said. And that's why you're on this channel, man, because you bring a different perspective and opinion and some great insight. Um, Kevin, before we move on, because I feel like this just ties in with everything we're talking about. You said that there was a comment you wanted to get to about the Suns CEO, Josh Bartlestein. So my guy Danger369 says Josh Bartlestein needs to take the court and put up some points because we got to hold him somewhat accountable. A lot of fans blame Matt Ishbia. A lot of fans blame uh, Mike Budenholzer, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. They're probably blaming the water
James
boy. You know what I
Jones.
mean? Yeah, James Jones. Yeah, I totally forgot to mention James Jones. They're blaming everybody. They're probably going to blame me and you for the lack of the Phoenix Suns' success. But you know what? Sorry, Josh Bartlestein. I hate to do this to you. You need to be held accountable too. Is there a specific reason why he needs to be held accountable, Kevin, in your personal opinion?
Um, if I'm being honest, I hope that the Suns comms team isn't hearing me and they decide to revoke my credentials. But
Right.
um,
Right.
Josh seems like a perfectly nice guy. He's been nice to me when we've exchanged pleasantries a couple times before. But if I'm being completely honest, I feel like he's in over his head when it comes to the basketball ops side of things. I think he's good with good enough with the financials and all that stuff. But his father is an agent, so he kind of came through on the business side of things. And I feel like Ishbia takes too much of his advice when it comes to the basketball side of things. And I think that's kind of what has played a part in getting him into this mess. Because I believe that Bud and James do have input too, but I believe that Josh probably has more so. And that would make sense because two of his father's clients are on the Suns. So it only makes sense for that to be the case. And I don't really think it takes a rocket scientist to put that together, to piece together circumstantial evidence. But yeah, I think that Josh kind of needs to take a step back when it comes to the basketball ops. And I don't know how to say it without like being mean. Like I don't want to like be too harsh, but
Yeah, me
like
neither, man.
it's kind of mad because like I mean, I can't say anything bad. Like James Jones, like he's made mistakes in the past, but he built a finals roster. He built a team that was 20 seconds away from being up 3-2 in the NBA finals. So you can only harp on him so much. Budenholzer built a phenomenal roster in Atlanta around guys that were seen as misfits outside of Al Horford and Paul Millsap. He went to Milwaukee and won a title where they hadn't done that in 50 years. Um, HB is the one that's pouring in all this money. He's committed to winning. He's committed to building a high class organization. He wants to give the fans an experience. It just feels like the odd man out of that is Josh. It feels like he needs to be bringing more to the table, if I'm being completely honest.
Well, John made us feel a little bit better about what we were just saying about the Sun CEO. Um, yeah, I'll just go check out Bright Side of the Sun. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's all I got to say about that. I was like, yeah, I was like, oh, Mo, I don't know if we should be talking about this, but it's like freedom of speech. You know, we can talk about whatever, especially on my channel. This is Suns Geek. It's what we do here, man. But yeah, I mean, I'll just say this. First off, from what I've seen, Josh Bartelstein really does seem like a really nice guy. I've actually known a couple Phoenix,
Mhm.
or excuse me, Footprint Center, or should I say, formerly known as Footprint Center employees that have met Josh Bartelstein. They say he's a great guy.
That's weird to say.
Yeah, right. I know, right? But yeah, everybody is to blame, is what I'm pretty much saving. Even me and you, Kevin. Somehow we are to blame for the Phoenix Suns' lack of success this season. I don't know what's going on, man. Kevin, let me just double check here. We're gonna get to a few more comments and questions. I think I highlighted like way too many. Real quick, Kevin, I'm gonna put you on the spot here from our guy John Voida from the Suns Jam Session podcast and Bright Side of the Sun. Question: which is more likely to happen, 23-4 or 4-23? I feel like there might be a middle path in there.
Oh
I'm going to go
my.
with the middle. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I think
that's
23-4 is extremely unlikely, but so is 4-23. I mean, yeah, we're
I'd
playing a tough schedule, but we can't go 4-23.
I'd say if I had to absolutely pick one, I'd lean more towards 4-23 if I'm being honest. I don't want to say that, but they've been the third worst team in the West record-wise since December 1st. So it's like we're coming down to 3 straight months of poor basketball. That's more than enough of a sample to me to believe that with this level of difficulty in the schedule ramping up, that it could be brutal. Like I said, I feel like it's possible they go 15, 16, 17 wins, but that's like absolute best case scenario. That's with everything clicking. That's with KD and Book staying healthy. That's
Yeah.
with Beal coming off the bench as a sixth man and producing consistently. Because we know with Brad, he has the motor that he can turn on and he can drop 30, but it's just not consistent right now. Uh, we need the rim pressure from him, by the way.
Yep.
Um, that's very important. But yeah, I'd say 4-23 would if I had to choose between the two.
Sort of a
But
follow-up
like you said, more in the
question.
middle.
Yeah, sort of a follow-up question, which kind of ties into it because we were talking about, obviously how many games we need to win to get into the freaking playoffs. But Mary asks a genuine question here. Do you think we can at least make the play-in? I know that's still bad, but I'm just wondering. That's a fair question. Like, can we at least make the
Mhm.
play-in, Kevin? That's how bad things have been. The Suns are like on the outside looking into the play-in. Like, I think we can, but
It's
you don't want to be in the play-in. I don't
yeah.
know.
The difficult thing is that I really don't see any team that the Suns can actually realistically jump that's ahead of them in the standings right now outside of Sacramento. I think
Yeah.
Sacramento is the only chance that you have, and I believe
Maybe Minnesota, maybe.
that Sacramento, I believe, has a 2-0 series advantage on the Suns this season, so
Huh.
you're really going to have to beat them when you play them, uh, in the upcoming matchups. You play them on, March 14th and the last game of the season, April 13th. If you beat them both those games and improve your record in the conference, then you'll probably there's good chance that you're right around the same record as them, so maybe you could sneak in over them. I just don't see them building enough momentum to get over the Jimmy Butler Warriors. I think that that move definitely pushed the Warriors into the upper tier of playing teams. I think they'll probably finish around 7 or 8. Uh, Dallas has been playing surprisingly well without AD.
Yeah.
They really don't have any they are really they just signed Moses Brown the other day,
Yep.
and they have been playing some great basketball, shockingly. Minnesota, I do not see Minnesota ceding that spot. They've really started to pick it up like people thought the Suns would. I don't think the Clippers or the Lakers are anywhere even close to the conversation. So Kings are really the only realistic team, I think, and even then, you look at the Kings and they have some ballers on the team. They Sabonis, Malik Monk, DeRozan, Levine back together, Keegan Murray.
They have like a new
They have
spark now
kind
that
of a
Doug Christie is coaching
yeah,
them
like
too. Mhm.
it's nothing too crazy or special. They have a lot of good NBA players on their team, and that counts for something. The Suns have a lot of good NBA players, but they haven't made it work. The Kings have made it work much quicker than the Suns have, and that says a lot about the current state of affairs with the two franchises, I think.
Yep.
It's those $2 hot dogs.
I know, right? I have a question for you, Kevin. Because I know you do,
Yeah,
for the
sure.
media side, you're a media member, but have you gone to a game just as a fan, and have you like gotten the $2 deal, the hot dog deal, or the chips or the soda? Because the one game I went to, I had to at least go up and look at it to see it with my own eyes, but I didn't purchase anything that day. Have you gotten a $2 hot dog though? Is my question.
Actually, I haven't been to a game as a fan since April 2023.
Oh
It
wow.
was
Okay.
I went to game 1 of the Clipper series with my pops, so
Nice.
that was that was not a good ending, and, I'm not proud of some of the videos I recorded after taking shots of tequila from Monty, but,
Oh God.
um
Yeah.
Yeah, that was still a fun game, but it's been a blessing to be able to go to games as media. It's really awesome. Um, that's proof to me that the Suns are a high class organization. They really do treat the media well. They really do. I can't say enough good things about how the comms team handles things.
Yep. Now, you know me, man. I mean, I went to my first media day with you in September, which was awesome. And thank you. If anybody from the Phoenix Suns is watching, thank you for allowing me to do that. I hope I can come back for more. But that was really fun. And yes, they do an excellent job of treating the media and letting even content creators like me, access to that. And I hope I can do more in the future. So Kevin, we've obviously spent a long time talking all things Phoenix Suns. We are going to move on to some other stuff here. Do you want to do a quick preview for tomorrow's game, which I believe is at like 3 o'clock or something like that? I
Mhm.
want to do a quick
Yeah.
preview on the Suns and Bulls. Just any thoughts, takeaways? Are the Suns going to win? Is what I'm going to ask you. But if you want to talk about the Suns and Bulls real quick.
Yeah, so, before I got on the show, I wrote a brief preview about this matchup since it's the first time the 2 teams are playing this season. Um, Chicago is very much leaned into the rebuild, going into the second half of the season. Obviously, they moved Zach LaVine out. They brought Trey Jones and
Yep.
Kevin Huerter in. They're very much focused on building around Matas Buzelis,
Yeah.
Kobe White,
They finally
even
embraced the
Jalen
youth
Smith.
movement.
Mhm. Um, Even Josh Giddey. I don't wanna say Josh Giddey, but he's a part of their core right now. Um,
He's
but
on their
you
team. He
look at
plays for them for
Chicago,
now.
you really look at Chicago from a distance, pretty much every single metric and raw stat, they're very mediocre, standing wise. They're very even poor in a lot of categories. But the one thing that they are really good at is three-point shooting. They are second in three-point volume. I believe they get up about 45 a game, which is only behind Boston, and Boston is obviously the benchmark for three-point volume.
Yeah.
Uh, they
They launch
also
like
are
what,
top
over
10 in
50 a
efficiency too.
game or something?
They have guys, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, Chicago has guys that will launch it. since Levine's gone now, it's mostly Kobe White. He's gonna get up 6 to 7, and he's really a firecracker. If he gets hot, it's really, really hard to contain him. Um, he's really strong pulling up above the break. He's very crafty. He's very shifty. Um, this is probably going to be a game where you really need to use Ryan Dunn to attack around the screens and um, run Kobe off the line, make life hard for him because he's really the engine they have right now. But also, you can't sleep on a Kevin Herter. You can't sleep on a Nikola Vucevic. You can't sleep on a uh, Ayo Dosunmu. Those
Yeah.
guys are
Mhm.
those guys can put the ball in the hoop too. Um, like D-Book likes to say, it's the NBA. No matter what team you're playing, all these guys are in the league for a reason.
Yep. All these
They
guys can shoot like Kevin Durant does.
any given
Mhm.
night, yeah.
I think fans forget
So
that too, man. I'm sorry to cut you off,
mhm.
Kevin. I think fans forget that.
No,
Like,
you're good.
social media trashes on everybody and all these players suck and these players can't shoot. But in reality, the 15th guy on the bench would cook both you and I. You know what I mean? We could play him 2-on-1 and he would light us up. The 15th guy on the bench. I truly believe that. Even some of these overseas guys and G League guys would absolutely cook us. Sorry to interrupt. I just
Oh
had to
yeah.
vent about that for a second.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I don't think people realize that they like to
Yeah.
talk trash about these players, and I'm like, man, Tony Snell would like
Yeah.
11-0 at any single one of us in a
He would
1v1
dunk
if
on our
we
face,
got to
steal our
if
wallet,
we
and
went to
steal our
Lifetime and
gold.
played right now. Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm not going to say Chicago's a give me at all because this like you even go down the coaching. Billy Donovan's a good
Right on
coach.
cue. I'm
I've been
sorry. Right on cue. Tyus couldn't defend my mom. Come on, dude. I'm sorry. Go. I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you.
No, you're good. That was a good one. That was a good one. I'm not going to say it's a shoo-in. Like I said, like I've been a fan of Billy Donovan for years and years, even going back to when he was a college coach, and I feel like he's really good at in-game management, even if the record hasn't really worked out for him in the last couple of years. Um, should the Suns win it? Yeah, they absolutely should win it. Will they win it? It's anybody's guess. Let's let Voida decide that.
Yeah,
Oh, there
John
he
says
goes.
they're
So,
younger, so we'll lose. He's probably right. I'm gonna go
I
on the
mean, Jay,
optimistic side. I'm gonna say we win because believe it or not, I mean, I don't want to jinx us here. I feel like I'm going to jinx us right here. On paper, Suns fans, our next 5-ish games are winnable, in my personal opinion. But every time I say that, we end up losing. Like we got Chicago, Toronto. I mean, Memphis is a really good team, but maybe we find a good spark and we beat the Grizzlies. Then we play the Pelicans back to back. You can't string along 5
oh
wins in a
brother.
row. Like, come on, dude. Like, we got to win something, man. But that's when the schedule gets hard after that. So I hope we win. I pray we win. We need every win possible, Suns fans. Kevin, I think it's come to the point of the show where we can kind of pull up some comments and questions, but I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. Do you have any questions for me, whether it's Suns related, NBA related, or just really anything, man? Like we can just kind of open up the show here and just talk about whatever, man.
Um, honestly, I'm kind of intrigued by those two Pelicans games back to back
Yeah, me
because I
too.
know that their record is like absolutely putrid, but man, Zion and Trey Murphy together,
Mm-hmm.
that's that could spell absolute doom for this defense. It's just I'm thinking about I mean, the first time they played in New Orleans in early December, they lost that game, and I believe that was CJ McCollum, one of his signature games this year.
Yep.
And he's been getting harped on by Pelicans fans all year long. They kind of want him out of there. So that's not a great omen to me. Like with Zion healthy and with Trey Murphy healthy and Trey actually making like an all-star level leap this year, that kind of concerns me a little bit. Like I feel like it very much could be a split kind of scenario there. Yep, you're
Mark
right.
Jackson said it perfectly, man. The Pelicans have our number. So
Yep.
if fans haven't been paying attention to the Pelicans, they're literally last year's Grizzlies. They are plagued by injuries, which is why I don't want to hear any Suns fans complaining about the injuries because the Pelicans are plagued by
Oh
injuries.
yeah.
But it seems like whenever they play us, it doesn't matter if they have G League guys in or their whole starting five, they always seem to have our number, man. So yeah, that's a good call. You're intrigued by those Pelicans games. I'm a little scared now, and I hope I didn't jinx us. But it would just be nice to put a little win streak together before we enter the month of
Mhm.
March and April. We play all these great teams. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
you look at
I,
this. Oh, my bad.
no, you're good. You're good. I was just
Um,
I'm at a loss for words. I don't know.
yeah, I was just gonna say, look at the schedule from
I can pull it
the
up real
beginning of
quick
March to
too.
mid-March.
Yeah,
I got it up.
cool.
Minnesota, LA Clippers, at Denver, at Dallas, at Memphis, at Houston, at
Don't
home
sleep
against
on the Clippers,
Sacramento, and
by the
then at the
way.
road against the Lakers.
Hmm.
That's like that's an absolutely absurd schedule stretch of the schedule. Like that's oof.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
brutal,
don't
man.
sleep on the Clippers.
Yep.
They got by the Clippers last time, but they're really, especially with that Ben Simmons ad, that's a whole different layer of athleticism, and we know the Suns don't do well with uber athletes, with plus athletes.
Yep. I got the schedule on the screen, or at least most of the schedule on the screen for anybody who wants to see it. But yeah, it is definitely a tricky schedule. A lot of great teams, a lot of teams that can sneak up on you, punch you in the mouth early. Because Kevin, you probably know this. Whenever we get punched in the mouth early, we usually don't recover, especially last year. So yeah, that is the Suns' schedule. So I'm hoping we can win as many games as possible. Kevin, before we kind of wrap up the show, I just want to get to a few comments that I highlighted. John Voida saying, we've never had the highest payroll ever and are unexplainably dysfunctional. That's just a good summary of the Suns season right there, man. And really sort of last season too. I am Technique says, I still had a hope they could turn it around, but the loss to the Spurs without them having Wemby was what finally changed my mind. Oh, I don't know. Mark says, imagine if
No, no words.
fans voted on major coaching decisions. If fans voted on coaching decisions, every coach in the league would be fired like the same season. Even like the
Mhm,
best teams in the league, like they would lose like three in a row, and fans would be asking for them to be fired. Let me just make sure I
mhm.
didn't miss any comments here. Um, Danger has sort of an optimistic thing here, and I like this. Last season, Katie and Book at 27 points per game each were in the top five duos of all time. Let's not forget that this is a great combo if it isn't obvious. So I sort of hinted at something like that. I think midway through our show, I said something along the lines of like, I think they need to kind of push all their chips in still around Katie and Book, keep building around Katie. I sort of hinted at that, and I've talked about it a lot of my live shows and videos. I don't think we should necessarily blow it all up. I don't think we should trade KD yet. I don't think we should fire Mike Budenholzer yet. James Jones, that's a whole different conversation for another podcast. But I mean, KD and Booker are good together. And last time I checked, we have a good record with them together. So I don't know. I think I'm going to end things here, though, Kevin, with this great comment. It's definitely time to panic when Suns Geek isn't being optimistic about the Suns. It's true, man. I've had barely little optimism to talk about my videos and live shows. It's just been tough, man. So, Kevin,
It's hard
any
to spin it.
final? Yeah, it's hard to spin it, man. Any final thoughts? Any final comments? Do you want to let the people know where to find you? Just take it away, man. The microphone is yours.
Yeah, so if you wanna find me and follow me, for my work on Twitter, my handle is at @khicks_21.
Yep.
Um,
It's in the
I haven't been
description down
as
below,
active
by the way.
in posting my links, from my, work on there, but I'm going to get back, into the routine of doing that. If you wanna just look me up and find me, I'm Phoenix Suns on SI. I'm on Phoenix Suns on SI. Uh, Also, by all means, check out Donnie Druin and Brendan Mao's work. They're both phenomenal
Yes.
as well.
Hmm.
Um, it's good for the Suns community to support each other. Media scape is really, um, landscape is really flourishing right now in the valley, and I'm so grateful for everybody that's supported me for kind words. for the belief in me. And yeah, thank y'all. Thank you for having me too, Brandon.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man. I appreciate you being here. Like I said, you guys, we met at Media Day. We started engaging on social media. We kind of just hit it off. And I was like, I need to bring a new voice on. I need to bring somebody who's going to bring great insight and opinion. And that's exactly what you've done here, Kevin. So I appreciate your time. And thank you, Kevin, for working with my schedule. I really do appreciate it, man. Would love to have you back on the channel
Absolutely.
sometime, and we'll talk all things Suns. And maybe one day we'll be able to like cover a game together in person. You know what I mean? That'd be a lot of fun,
That
man.
would be awesome. That would be
Yep.
awesome.
Can't wait, man. So we'll definitely have to get you back on the show sometime. And thank you to everybody who watched along live and engaged and left great comments. Like my guy John Voida here said, "Love you guys." Hashtag Suns down,
Yep.
not Suns up, because we are
John's
Suns down right now.
John's the GOAT.
I love John, man. I can't wait to get him back on the channel as well. And thank you, Danger, for engaging. Mary, Mark, Suns Fever, my guy Adrian, Suns Fever, everybody, Aaron, and just thank you guys for engaging and watching and listening. And even if you're watching later, I really do appreciate the support. Mark says, "Thank you, Brandon, for all you do. I'm not going to move back to the Valley." That sucks, man. I hope you can move back soon, because I've been here over 2 months and I love it, man. Please move to Arizona, everybody. Mary, thank you so much for being here. And yeah, that's pretty much it, you guys. Stay tuned. We'll see if the Phoenix Suns can actually, win a game tomorrow. That'd be nice if they could do that. So make sure to crush that like button. Hulk smash that like button, you guys. Subscribe for the latest Phoenix Suns news and so much more. Thank you to my guest, Kevin Hicks from Sports Illustrated, for joining me. Peace out. God bless. Win or lose, Phoenix Suns for life. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
What's up, son?